For this session, we will talk about your tax remedies. So whenever we talk about tax remedies is part and parcel of your due process of law. So tax remedies can either be a government remedy or a taxpayer remedy. Government remedy or taxpayer remedy. So for government remedy, as you all know, the government through the BIR uh, can assess and collect the tax. So part of tax administration is the assessment and collection. Now, if ever they cannot properly assess and collect, there are remedies to assess and also remedies to collect. In the same vein, of course, the taxpayer also has a process or procedures or remedies to dispute the assessment or dispute or recover the improper collection. Okay? So therefore, whenever we talk about tax remedies, it should be a tax remedy for assessment on the part of the government and the taxpayer, and another tax remedy for collection for the government and the taxpayer. So for assessment, the government will assess the taxpayer for any deficiency, tax, or delinquency. And the taxpayer, in the same vein, will try to dispute that assessment. So any remedy that the law provides for the proper procedure or process in your assessments and collection. So for this session, our main focus is your tax remedy on the assessment. So tax remedies. So for government, we have tax remedies, either administrative or judicial remedy for assessment and collection. And as we said, the taxpayer also has administrative and judicial remedies to dispute this assessment or dispute or recover illegal collections of taxes by the government. So our main focus for this session, purely the assessment. So government remedy of assessment. So what is an assessment? An assessment is similar to audit. It is similar to audit. It is a finding by the taxing authority. It is a finding by the taxing authority that the taxpayer has not paid the correct taxes. So as a rule, assessment is the official action of an officer, which is, of course, authorized by law to ascertain the amount due. And that is through giving notice to the taxpayer for requiring him to pay whatever is the deficiency tax. So whenever we talk about here on your assessment, this is already initiated by the BIR. So again, it is like an audit. So an officer is authorized by law to ascertain the amount due by the taxpayer. So how? So the assessment contains not only the computation of your tax liabilities, but also a demand for payment within a prescribed period. In our previous sessions, we have already learned that once you are given a deficiency tax or an assessment, it already provides there also the due date. So it also signals the time when penalties and interest begin to accrue against the taxpayer. Because again, if ever you will not pay within the due date, you are subject to delinquency interest. Okay? So the question is, when is the proper period to assess? The proper period to assess is either 3 years or 10 years. So when is it 3 years? If ever it is a simple neglect, you can be assessed within 3 years. Willful neglect, 10 years. So when can we say you have a simple neglect? So if ever after the due date for the filing of return, or a return filed before the due date shall be considered as filed on such due date from the day the return was filed. If ever it is filed beyond the due date, or the filing of the amended return if the return was amended substantially. Okay, so 3 years for simple neglect on the due date or filing date whichever is later. So for example, ITR on 2021, due date is April 15, 2022. You filed on March 31, 2022. When is the last day to assess? Assuming it is a simple neglect. So it is the due date or the filing date, whichever is the later. Where's the due date? April 15. Filing date, March 31. What is later between the two? It is April 15. You add 3 years. That is the last day to assess. So that is until April 15, 2025. How about if you filed on June 10, 2022? When is the last day to assess? Again, due date is April 15. Filing date is June 10. The last day should be later between the two. That is June 10 plus 3 years. So 2025. 2022 plus 3 years is 2025. That is the last day to assess. If ever it is simple neglect. For willful neglect, it is 10 years. If it's false or fraudulent or non-filing, you already know that. Now, when is it false or fraudulent again? We have the 30% rule, prima facie evidence, 30% under declaration of your income, sales, or receipts, over declaration of your deductions. Okay? So that's the last day to assess. Why is it important for us to determine the last day to assess? Because if ever it is made beyond the due date, it is considered invalid. If made beyond the due date, it is considered invalid. So let's take a look into your administrative assessment. So basically, let's just look at this first, and then after that, let's look to it in depth. So first, it starts with a letter of authority, and then we have now your notice of discrepancy, then explanation, PAN, reply, FLD FAN, protest, and a protest can be reconsideration or reinvestigation. Then we have now FDDA or inaction of the BAR. So this is only the process. As a rule, however, again, as I said, we will look into it one by one. So let's start first with your LOA. So how does your LOA starts? So actually, there are different ways for the BIR to assess or to audit. So we have learned before that there can be letter of notice, letter of authority, or a tax verification notice. So what if it starts with your letter of notice? Again, your audit process can start either by giving letter of notice, letter of authority, or a tax verification notice. So what if it starts with letter of notice? What is a letter of notice? A letter of notice is a communication from the BIR National Office informing the taxpayer of a finding of significant discrepancy in the relief system. So what happens here? So there is a filing, and based on the relief system of the BIR, the filing does not correspond with the filing in the relief. So based on that, there will be a letter of notice. So from the letter of notice, you are given 5 days. You are given 5 days to reconcile the discrepancy. So the taxpayer is given 5 days to reconcile the discrepancy. So after that, what will happen, sir? If ever it is reconciled, then there will be no problem. Okay? If reconciled, no problem. But what if it is not reconciled? If reconciled, no problem. Not reconciled, then you either agree or disagree. If you agree with the discrepancy, you need to pay within 30 days. But if you do not agree with the discrepancy, the BIR is given, the BAR and the taxpayer is given 120 days to resolve that discrepancy, particularly, of course, the taxpayer. Now, what if it is still unresolved? If it's still unresolved, what happens is that you convert the letter of notice to LOA. Actually, the authorized personnel must recommend the issuance of an LOA. Sir, what is the effect? What is the effect? Because if ever letter of notice is not converted to an LOA, it is considered invalid. There can be no assessment without an LOA through an LN. Take note, an LN cannot be considered automatically converted to LOA. Furthermore, LN cannot LN cannot replace LOA. So therefore, what is needed to be done here is that the LN must be issued, or there must be an LOA for that LN. If no LOA for that LN, invalid assessment. So take note, LN cannot be automatically converted to LOA. There must be a recommendation for the issuance of LOA. So if there's no LOA, invalid. Furthermore, LN cannot replace the LOA. So if no LOA, again, invalid. Now, let's go to the authority to audit, assuming it will now go to an LOA. So what is an LOA? Basically, there are two main authority to audit. In short, assessment starts with this. So basically, we need to determine the type of tax to be audited. Is it a recurring tax or an on-it tax? If that is a recurring tax, then generally it is an LOA, that is the authority to audit. That is the document for the authority to audit. But if that is one-time tax, then the document for authority to audit is TVN. So what is LOA? Again, that is letter of authority. Some call this one as LA. Okay, it can be LOA or LA. And then we have TVN, that is tax verification notice. Tax verification notice. Again, LOA is the official document that authorizes the BAR revenue officer to examine the taxpayer's books and other accounting records to determine his correct tax liabilities. While TVN authorizes the evaluation or verification of tax of one-time transaction. So generally, if that is recurring, as we said, LOA. If that is on it, TVN. So you should know the proper authority to audit document that will be issued so that the assessment will prosper. Again, if that is purely LN, that is not valid assessment. It must be converted to LOA. Now, what particular document must give or must authorize a particular BIR official to conduct the audit? It could be LOA or TVN. LOA for recurring, TVN for on-it. Now, when can we say that the LOA or the authority to audit is valid? So here are the requirements. First, it must indicate the period covered. Second, it indicate the authorized examiners. Third, it must be in electronic form, that is BIR form 1966. Fourth, it indicates the taxes covered. Fifth, it is issued and approved by proper signatories. Lastly, it is served within 30 days. Let's start first with period covered. Now, for period covered, there must be one LOA for one period. One LOA for one period. So for example, you are to audit 2021, there must be one LOA here. Furthermore, the LOA must specify that period. If the period is not specified, it is considered invalid. If the period is not specified, it is considered invalid. If more than one period, if more than one period, there must be separate LOAs. So for example, you want to audit 2020, 2021. So separate here, separate for 2020. So separate LOAs. Furthermore, guys, you can only be subject to audit of year only once. So let's say, for example, 2020 was audited. Okay, so now you are auditing 2020. Can it still be audited again for 2024? So let's see, another LOA for 2020 on 2024 can still be audited on 2024? No, because a year can only be audited once. Okay, take note of that. So period covered, there must be one LOA for one period. So this period must be specified in the audit. If there's more than one period, there must be separate LOAs for those periods. The LOA cannot cover more than one period. If it covers more than one period, of course, there's an invalidity there. Furthermore, once a period is already covered by an audit, it cannot be considered to be it cannot be subjected again to another audit. So a year can only be audited once. Second, it indicates the authorized examiners. So your LOA must provide the different examiners in who will conduct the audit, and they are only the ones who will conduct the audit. Second, it must be an electronic form. So the electronic form now is using BIR form 1966. We call this one ELOA or ELA. Okay? The LOA must be in electronic form. Issuance of manual LOA is not allowed. So if the LOA is manual, it is considered already invalid. It must be in electronic form. Second, the taxes covered. The taxes, fourth one, the taxes covered, it must specify the national internal revenue taxes covered. So if it's VAT, VAT. If percentage tax, percentage tax. Can it be more than different types of taxes? Yes, as long as it is indicated there in the LOE. Fifth one, it is issued and approved by proper signatories. So who are these proper signatories? So if the issuer is RDO, then the one who will approve it is the regional director. If the issuer is the Large Taxpayer Service Audit Division or LTS, the one who will approve it is the Assistant Commissioner LTS. If the one who issues it is the National Investigation Division, the one who will approve it is the CIR. Why is this again important? Because if it is not properly issued and approved by the proper signatories, again, it will be considered as invalid. So all of these items must concur so that we can say it is valid. Lastly, the service. It must be served within 30 days from the date of issuance. If not served, it can be revalidated. So for example, the issuance date is June 10. When is the last day to serve? When is the last day to serve? So you add 30 days. You add 30 days. So it will now be July 20. July 20, that is the last day. What if it is not served within July 20? Then it can be revalidated. So if ever it comes from the RDO, if RDO, you can only revalidate it only once. If from CIR, it can be revalidated twice. It can be revalidated twice. So take note of that. Why? Because if it's served, for example, issuance is June 10, the last day is July 20. The LOA was only served to you on July, let's say the LOA was only served to you on July 30. It was only served to you July 30. Is it considered valid service? No, because it must be served within 30 days. So again, when can we say that the authority to audit is valid? It should indicate the period covered. It indicates the examiners. It must be an ELOA. It indicates the taxes covered, the signatories, and the service is within 30 days. We have here PE squared PETS 30. PETS 30. So period covered, examiners, electronic form, taxes, signatories, and serve within 30 days. Do not forget also the service. But take note, even if it is not served, it could be revalidated. It could be revalidated. If RDO, you can revalidate it only once. If CIR, you revalidate it twice. That is for our LOA. Now, assuming there is a valid LOA, the next step now is a tax audit. So there's a valid LOA, then there will be a service to the taxpayer. We said 30 days. And if ever on that service, if not served, it can be revalidated. Now there will be a tax audit. The tax audit is 120 days. The tax audit is 120 days. Now, how does the audit work? The audit happens, so the examiners will now go to the taxpayer and will ask for the books and records. So generally, this is in a form of a checklist. This is in the form of checklist. And this checklist must be provided to the taxpayer, and the taxpayer must comply. So within 10 days, the taxpayer is given a period to comply. So the period to comply is 10 days. The next question is the taxpayer compliant or not? If the taxpayer complied, then no problem. The audit continues. But if ever the taxpayer did not comply, then the BAR will issue first notice. Okay? So did it comply? The answer, if yes, then audit continues. If the answer is no, then there can be now first notice. And then again, did the taxpayer comply? If your answer is yes, audit continues. If the answer is no, you are now given a second and final notice. Okay? So this one is first notice. If the answer is no, you have now second and final notice. Now, if ever it complies, yes, audit continues. If it is still no, then the BIR can now file a case for contempt, or there will be a criminal case. So you are only given 10 days to comply this. Now, what if really there is no compliance? If there is no compliance, we have this so-called jeopardy assessment. What is the jeopardy assessment? If the BIR believes that the taxpayer unduly delays the audit process, there can be a jeopardy assessment. So if we define jeopardy assessment, it is made by authorized revenue officer without the benefit of a complete or partial audit in light of the officer's belief that the assessment and collection of a deficiency tax will be jeopardized by the delays caused by the taxpayer to comply. So again, there's all LOA. You are now auditing the taxpayer, and the period to audit is only 120 days. So you ask now the taxpayer, give me your books and records. However, the taxpayer did not comply. You gave first notice, the taxpayer still did not comply. You gave second notice, the taxpayer still did not comply. So you think that because of the period of non-compliance, you cannot already audit, because again, you can only audit within 120 days. But because of the non-compliance, there's no sufficient time to audit already. So since there's no sufficient time to audit, we have this so-called jeopardy assessment. You will now audit the taxpayer based on existing records or data. So in jeopardy assessment, what happens? There is a subpoena ducis tecum. You now compel the taxpayer to submit the books and record as. If the taxpayer will comply, then you assess based on the documents submitted. But if the taxpayer does not comply, you assess based on best evidence obtainable. Aside from jeopardy assessment, you can also file a criminal case or a contempt. And even if, take note of this rule, even if the taxpayer subsequently complied, okay? Taxpayer subsequently complied, what is the effect? The case continues and the case cannot be dismissed, notwithstanding the subsequent submission of the documents. Okay? So I hope you are clear here. Once the LOA is already given or service, there will be now an audit. On your audit, the taxpayer is asked to comply by giving their books or records. If the taxpayer refuses to comply or unduly delays the audit process, then there can be jeopardy assessment. If ever there is really complete refusal, you can also file a criminal case or contempt. And once a criminal case or contempt is already filed and the taxpayer subsequently complied, what is the effect? The case still continues and the case cannot be dismissed, even considering the compliance of the taxpayer. So that is the audit process. Now, after the audit process, okay, so there's now the audit, right? There's now the audit. After that, there will be finding whether there is a deficiency or there is no deficiency. If there is deficiency, then there is notice of deficiency. But if there's no deficiency, end of assessment. So by now, what they finish only is LOA, audit, and then notice of deficiency. Now we go to your notice of deficiency. So notice of deficiency. So in your notice of deficiency, the taxpayer is given 30 days from receipt to present explanation, evidence, or anything that could support that explanation. So again, notice of deficiency is already given, or notice of deficiency. Notice of discrepancy. Notice of discrepancy is already given. So if the notice of discrepancy is given, the taxpayer has 30 days to present explanation and evidence. Now, if ever that is addressed, then end of assessment. If not, there will be a discussion. Okay, there will be a discussion. And 10 days from the conclusion of the discussion, the BIR can now issue preliminary assessment notice. Preliminary assessment notice. Okay, so in your preliminary assessment notice, what will happen? The preliminary assessment notice now assesses the taxpayer of the discrepancy or the deficiency taxes. And then the taxpayer either replies to the PAN or does not reply to the PAN. Sir, what is the effect if the taxpayer replies to the PAN? The taxpayer is given 15 days from the receipt of the PAN to reply. But if the taxpayer did not reply to the PAN, the BIR must first exhaust the 15 days before issuing fine. Okay, ulitin natin. Pag may PAN, taxpayer can reply or cannot reply. Or taxpayer will reply or hindi siya magre-reply. Kung magre-reply siya, may 15 days siya to reply from the receipt of the PAN. Pero kung hindi siya magre-reply, hindi pwedeng walang fine. Kailangan tapusin muna ni BIR yung 15 days bago siya magbibigay ng fine. So kaya nandito, nilagay ko dito, reply is not mandatory, but the 15-day period is mandatory before the issuance of fine if fine precedes PAN. So in short, if there's a PAN, the BIR cannot issue a fine before the 15-day or before the expiration of 15-day. So for example, PAN is given on June 10. PAN is given June 10, right? So assuming there's no reply, what is the effect if ever fund is provided on June 20? Okay? Pwede bang mag-issue si BIR ng fund ng June 20? No, that is considered invalid. Why? Kasi nga, mandatory yung 15-day period. So kailangan, magbibigay lang ng fund si BIR ng June 26. Why? Kasi nga, plus 15 days, ang last day to reply ay June 25. So after the expiration of that reply, pwede na siyang mag-issue ng fund ng June 26. Ingatan nyo yun, ha? Reply is not mandatory for the taxpayer, but the 15-day period is mandatory. The BIR cannot issue a fund without the exhaustion of the 15-day period. So if ever the taxpayer will reply, if the taxpayer will reply, the contents of the reply is the explanation on matters questioned by the examiner, the factual and legal basis, and the prayer for either full or partial cancellation of the PAN. That is the content of your reply. So you explain kung bakit yon, factual and legal basis, and a prayer for full or partial cancellation. Now, how about your FAN? When can we say it is valid? The FAN is valid if ever it's in writing, the facts and law is discussed, the tax liability or the amount is given on that FAN, the due date and demand for payment is given, it is issued by the proper party and served within the prescriptive period. And already know the prescriptive period, that is either 3 years or 10 years. You already know the due date and demand for payment. Why? Because again, we said your assessment notice must provide for the due date and when is it considered due. But take note, there must be a proper demand for payment. There must be a proper demand for payment. Now, there are also instances that there is no issuance of PAN. It is directly FAN. Okay? Pwedeng walang PAN, diretsong FAN. Kailan walang PAN, diretsong FAN. So instances where PAN is not required. First, if deficiency arises from mathematical error. Second, withholding tax is already withheld and remitted. Third, if tax claim applied with tax credit or tax refund is carried over in the current period, so there is already double claim. The excise tax on articles has not been paid, or excisable goods are sold by exempt persons to non-exempt persons. In that case, PAN is not required, diretso tayong FAN. O, ulitin natin. So, may notice of discrepancy. Within 30 days, pinag-usapan nyo na ni BIR yan. Kung naayos yung discrepancy, edi tapos na yung usapan. End of assessment. Paano kung hindi naayos yung discrepancy? From 10 days, from the conclusion of the discussion on the notice of discrepancy, the BIR can now issue PAN. But within 15 days, the taxpayer can reply to the PAN or will not reply to the PAN. So, hindi mandatory na magre-reply si taxpayer, pero mandatory yung 15-day period. Kung nag-reply siya, dapat 15 days nag-reply siya bago mag-i-issue si BIR ng FAN. Kung hindi siya nag-reply bago mag-i-issue si BIR ng FAN, kailangan ma-exhaust mo na yung 15 days. The 15 days must expire before issuing FAN. Furthermore, pwede rin na walang PAN, diretsong FAN. Kailan yon? Again, mathematical error. Withholding tax is withheld and remitted. Tax claim is carried over. Excise tax has not been paid. And excisable goods are sold by exempt persons. Kung mag-reply ka, anong laman ng reply mo? Explanation, facts and law. At the same time, prayer for cancellation of the PAN. Kung nag-issue si BIR ng FAN, kailan siya valid? In writing, facts and law, tax liability, kailangan yung due date and there must be a demand issued by proper party served within the prescribed period, prescriptive period, which is the 3 years and 10 years. Now, assuming there is a FAN, there is a 30-day period for the taxpayer to protest. So 30 days to protest. And how do you protest? Either reconsideration or reinvestigation. Sir, what's the difference? If that is considered reconsideration, then you are asking the BIR to just reconsider based on the facts and law you have provided. If reinvestigation, you provide additional documents. So for reconsideration, the CIR has 180 days to decide. If reinvestigation, you are given 60 days, taxpayer is given 60 days to submit documents. And after that 60-day period, the CIR has 180 days to decide. Now, when can we say that the process is valid? The protest is valid if ever the protest provides for the nature of protest, the facts and law is present, the date of assessment notice is also present. Why is it important? The date of assessment notice is important because you determine there whether the protest was timely filed. So, ito yung FAN, halimbawa. Tapos, kailangan malaman kung yung protest is within the 30-day period to file a protest. After that, you submit documents if ever it is reinvestigation. If not reinvestigation, then no need to submit document. So pag reconsideration, no need to submit document. Reinvestigation, you have 60 days to submit document. And within 180 days, the CAR will now decide. So ulitin natin. From audit, okay, di ba magsisimula siya sa authority to audit. What is that authority to audit? Through LOA or tax verification notice. Tapos, magkakaroon na talaga ng audit. Then, mag-i-issue ng notice of discrepancy. Pag-uusapan nila yon. Kung hindi pa rin naayos yung discrepancy, within 10 days, there's fund. Pwedeng mag-reply or hindi mag-reply. Tapos, magkakaroon ng fund. Pwede rin walang fund, diretsong fund. And then, if ever tingin mo, kailangan mo pa rin i-dispute, you need to protest within 30 days from the date of the fund. And your protest can either be reconsideration or reinvestigation. Reconsideration, you ask the BIR to reconsider based on existing facts. How about reinvestigation? You submit additional documents, and you have 60 days to submit additional documents. After that, that's the end of our admin remedies. That's the end of admin remedies. Okay, so there's a protest, either reconsideration or reinvestigation. What will happen? The BIR now either issues final demand on disputed assessment, FDDA, or the BIR did not act. Ano yung inaction, sir? Di ba 180 days kasi. Kung wala pa rin siyang decision, ang tawag natin doon sa ay inaction. Or kung masyado kang pasensyoso, pwede mo ring antayin si BIR. So if ever ang ginawa is may FDDA, then 30 days from the receipt of the adverse decision, you can now file a motion for recon to the CIR. Motion for recon to the CIR. Or, diretso kang judicial remedy. Kung in action naman, or wait for BIR, then judicial remedy. So in action and wait for BIR, these two options are mutually exclusive. So if ever pinili mo in action, then judicial remedy, then yun na. So if ever, if the taxpayer opted for the first option, the taxpayer must wait for BIR action and cannot proceed to the CTA until the BIR denies his administrative appeal. Okay? So kung nag-motion for recon siya, that is your administrative appeal, hindi ka pwedeng mag-judicial remedy. Tandaan nyo yan. Okay. So 180 days. After that, may pwedeng mag-i-issue si CIR ng FDDA or yung authorized representative niya ng FDDA, or hindi siya nag-decide. So kung may decision siya through FDDA, you can file a motion for recon, 30 days yan. Or pwede ka rin mag-diretso na ng judicial remedy. In action, wait for BIR, pwede rin judicial remedy. Kung wait for BIR, syempre magbibigay si BIR ng FDDA, pwede mo pa rin yung motion for recon, and then you start for judicial remedies. Now, let's go to your judicial remedies. So, you file now your petition for review to the CTA division. That is 30 days from the receipt of adverse decision or from the lapse of the 180-day period. Now, from CTA division, meron kang dalawang choice. Ang first choice mo ay motion for recon or new trial sa CTA division. Recon or new trial sa CTA division. Or pwede mo siyang i-appeal agad sa CTA and bank. Kung pinili mo yung una, CTA division, tapos recon sa CTA division, then pupunta ng NBank. Yan yung first one. Kung pinili mo yung pangalawa, CTA division, dediretso ka naman ng appeal NBank. Pwedeng ganyan. Tapos, yung appeal NBank, pwede mo uli yung motion for recon ng NBank bago ka pumunta ng Supreme Court. Just remember here, from the date of admin remedy, to judicial remedy, 30 days. And lahat na ng judicial remedy, 15 days. Bahala ka na kung gusto mong CTA division muna or pumunta ka CTA NBank, or pwede ka rin mag-review on certiorari sa Supreme Court. Basta ang importante dito, tandaan nyo yung days Pagkatapos ng admin remedy, you have 30 days for judicial remedy. CTA Division, CTA and Bank, Supreme Court, 15 days. Ganun lang yung hierarchy niya. And let's say sa CTA Division, gusto mong i-recon yun, pwede mo lang i-reconsideration yun sa CTA Division bago ka mag-appeal sa NBank. Pwede mo uling pwede mo rin uli reconsideration yung sa NBank bago ka pumuntang SC. Tapos, pag nandun ka na sa SC, wala na talaga. Yun na yung final na decision. So pagdating sa Supreme Court, there will be a petition for review on certiorari sa Supreme Court. Yun yung ating final judicial remedy. After that, you already exhausted the different remedies. Okay, so just a quick recap. We start first with the authority to audit. From authority to audit, there will be now LOA. Okay? That LOA must be served within 30 days. And then there is now the audit period. The audit period is 120 days. Then if still there is a discrepancy, there is a notice of discrepancy, then within 30 days, you must 30 days to explain. If ever wala pa rin, there is now PAN. And then, pwede kang mag-reply or hindi ka mag-reply within 15 days. Tapos, there is now FAN. And then, you need to protest this FAN within 30 days. Tapos, either reinvestigation or reconsideration. Then, within 180 days, mag-decide si BIR. So, pwedeng FDDA in action or wait sa BIR. That is the end of our admin remedy. Tapos, magpe-petition for review ka from your admin remedy to judicial remedy within 30 days. Tapos, CTA Division, CTA and Bank, Supreme Court, lahat doon 15 days na. Okay? So, that is your whole judicial remedies for assessment, for government, and for the taxpayer, for the admin and judicial remedy. Okay, recap. For government, if there's a notice of discrepancy given by government, the taxpayer has to present explanation and evidence within 30 days. Government can issue PAN, the taxpayer has reply within 15 days. If the government will issue FAN, you have to protest within 30 days. If there's already an FDDA, you must admin appeal or judicial appeal within 30 days. If there's a court adverse decision, you need to appeal to the CTA or Supreme Court 15 days. Okay? So that's it for tax remedies as to your assessment, both for government and taxpayer.